Number 10. Deadly dispute between neighbors. The animosity between Fairfax, Virginia neighbors Michael Hetley and Javon Prather started in 2016 with petty disagreements. Hetley was a former police officer and a NASA executive in his late 40s, and Prather was a young soldier in the Maryland National Guard. Tensions grew over the years as Hetley complained about Prather and his wife Janelle drinking, playing loud music, and arguing. The Prathers got the distinct impression that Hetley was a racist. Hetley complained so much about the Prathers that in 2020, the neighborhood's homeowners association told him that there was nothing more they could do. One morning, he sent the HOA an email warning that the dispute could result in tragedy. In a terrifying scene captured by Hetley's Ring camera later that day, Prather came over to the house at one point and knocked on the door. Hetley answered and immediately opened fire, shooting his neighbor in the abdomen and continuing to shoot as Prather collapsed to the ground and stopped moving. He then pointed the loaded gun at Janelle, who had run over to see what the commotion was all about. Authorities charged Hetley with murder. He argued that he shot Prather in self-defense, but the prosecutor described it as an execution. The jury found Hetley guilty, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Number 9. Nameless nuisance. A woman was home alone at her downtown Las Vegas home one night in July of 2021 when a man she didn't recognize rang the doorbell. He said that he had a couple of questions. She remained out of sight and didn't respond as he knocked and repeatedly asked, "Are you sure? Are you positive? I just have a few questions for you." The woman's husband, who wasn't home but was watching via the couple's Ring camera, got on the intercom right as the man was turning to walk away and asked him to identify himself. He once again stated that he had some questions, then asked for the girl that's inside the house to come out so he could assault and kill her. When the woman didn't respond, he repeated the threats and said that he had a knife and a gun. He knocked one more time before he finally left. The frightened homeowner filed a police report and posted the alarming footage on social media to raise awareness and in hopes that someone would help law enforcement find the man. It paid off when a local resident recognized the suspect and called the police. When they took him into custody, he refused to divulge his name and referred to himself as the Holy Spirit. He's identified as 40-year-old Christopher Sums in an arrest report obtained by the 8 News Now I-team, which also details how Sums may have noticed the woman through an open window before he approached the door. He was charged with aggravated stalking, coercing with threat of force, attempted burglary, and providing a false statement to an officer. According to the most recent update from August of 2021, Sums was turned over to state-appointed experts for a psychological evaluation to determine if he's competent to stand trial. Number 8. From college to crime. Police in Youngstown, Ohio, rushed to an address on the city's south side in September of 2019 after receiving reports of gunfire. They arrived to find 2 injured victims and a small fire in the kitchen. The home's residents, 33-year-old Jamie Traylor and 27-year-old Clarissa Lucky, were taken to the hospital with multiple gunshot wounds. They told investigators that they heard a knock and one of them answered the door to find a woman standing in front of a man. Without warning, the man shot the resident and the burglars pushed their way into the house. The injured resident played dead, then crawled into their basement. In the meantime, the intruders shot the other resident in the face. Both victims survived with injuries. A few days after the crime, authorities issued warrants for 38-year-old Nicole Taylor and 46-year-old Robert Young, who were seen entering the home in doorbell camera footage. The suspects spent 5 months on the run before turning themselves in early 2020. They both bonded out while awaiting trial, but Young failed to show up for his next court date and has been on the run ever since. He previously served prison time for murder in Michigan, making his current absence especially alarming. Taylor, a former pre-med student who traded her promising future for the life-ruining decision to commit a violent crime, pleaded guilty to aggravated burglary and attempted murder. Her lawyer argued that she didn't realize Young planned to shoot the victims, but under Ohio law, she had a duty to try stopping him and didn't. She's scheduled to be sentenced in December of 2022. Prosecutors are recommending a 15 to 19-year sentence, while her attorney plans to argue for a lesser sentence. Number 7. A homeowner's horror. Around 1 o'clock in the morning on October 28, 2022, two armed intruders entered a home in Kirkland, Washington. They got in through an unlocked door and ambushed a woman who was sleeping on the sofa. Court documents describe how one of the men held a gun to the victim's head, while another pressed the barrel into her chest. Fearing for her life and for the safety of other household members who were asleep, the woman complied with the burglar's demands. She handed over her cell phone, credit cards, and cash. One of the perpetrators ran off while the other stayed behind and brutally assaulted her before leaving the scene. Police uncovered surveillance footage of the suspects, and within hours of the burglary, a SWAT team arrested 23-year-old Boubacar Touré and 19-year-old Mohamed Sassé. According to police documents, the pair admitted to their involvement in the crime. The victim's phone and credit cards were recovered from a vehicle belonging to one of the men. Touré is being held on $750,000 bail, and Sassé's bail is set at $500,000 while they await the next steps in the case. At number 6, cop impersonator's crime spree. A resident in Orem, Utah, allowed a distressed young woman to seek refuge in his home after witnessing a man trying to get her into his vehicle. The man followed. A home surveillance camera captured the suspect, later identified as 44-year-old Oscar Colob Garcia Castorena, repeatedly claiming to be a police officer from the neighboring city of Utah. The homeowner asked Garcia Castorena to leave and told him that he was scaring some kids who were at the house for a party. In response, the suspect threatened to hurt the homeowner multiple times and asked him if he was also scared. An arrest affidavit described how Garcia Castorena was the subject of several suspicious persons reports earlier that day, claiming that he was trying to lure young women into his vehicle. During that same week, police investigated multiple complaints of slashed tires involving 17 vehicles belonging to 12 victims. Once again, surveillance footage connected Garcia Castorena to the crimes. He faces at least a half-dozen charges stemming from the crime spree, including DUI, disorderly conduct, giving false information to police, burglary, criminal mischief, and impersonating a police officer. Number 5. Dog-napping delivery driver. Denise Reppenhagen was devastated when her beloved golden retriever Finn disappeared from her Encinitas, California home in 2022. The dog had gotten loose when a family member left the garage door open. Denise searched tirelessly for Finn, contacting community members and animal shelters, and doing anything else she could think of to get the word out. A few weeks later, a neighbor came forward with surveillance footage that showed a package delivery woman putting the dog in her car. Someone recognized the woman in the footage as 36-year-old Dina Vindiola. She allegedly admitted to stealing Finn and told sheriff's deputies that she tried giving the dog to a friend and her mother, but neither of them wanted him. She surrendered Finn to an animal shelter, and he was placed with a foster family while awaiting permanent adoption. After learning that the golden retriever already had a loving forever home, the foster family met up with Denise and Finn was reunited with his family. Oddly, the rescue organization that had Finn in its care had listed his name as Bear on its website based on his microchip information. Alarmed by the discovery, the only explanation Denise can think of is that someone somehow changed Finn's microchip data, but it's unclear how this happened. Vindiola was charged with felony grand theft and 2 misdemeanors. The case is ongoing. Number 4. Video game vendetta. Early one morning in 2019, police in Round Lake Beach, Illinois, responded to reports of shots fired at a neighbor's home. They found 48-year-old Mariana Castro-Tellez dead with stab wounds and other injuries. Surveillance footage from nearby homes showed a man fleeing the scene on foot. A relative of the victim identified the suspect as 23-year-old Alonzo Campos Jr. and told detectives that Campos had recently pawned a PlayStation 4 to one of the victim's household members. After trying and failing to collect payment for it at least once, he returned with a BB gun and shot Castro-Tellez several times before stabbing her to death with a kitchen knife. Campos faces 5 counts of first-degree murder and 2 felony counts of home invasion. If convicted of the murders, he could face up to 60 years in prison. The home invasion charges could carry an additional 30 years. Number 3. The slaying of Jeff German. Staff members at the Las Vegas Review-Journal were shocked when their colleague, 69-year-old veteran reporter Jeff German, was found stabbed to death in his yard in September of 2022. Surveillance footage from nearby homes reportedly showed the suspect approaching German's home, then attacking him right as he opened the gate to his backyard. The video also showed the suspect pulling up to and driving away from the house, according to the Review-Journal. The victim's co-workers at the Review-Journal played an imperative role in cracking the case. After learning of German's murder, they conducted their own investigation. They knew that German had an extensive history of reporting on the seedy underworld of Las Vegas, and that it was certainly possible that someone wanted him dead. But the fact that the murder was carried out in broad daylight, along with evidence found at the scene, indicated that the killer was inexperienced. This essentially ruled out any theory about organized crime or a career criminal being involved. A review of German's past social media posts led the team to identify former Clark County Public Administrator Robert Telles as a possible person of interest. German had conducted an extensive investigation into Telles, and his findings had largely contributed to the loss of the politician's re-election bid. Staff members were sent to drive past his house, where they saw a vehicle matching the SUV seen in the surveillance footage from the day of the murder. Detectives dug deeper and found Telles' DNA at the scene. He was charged with murder and is being held without bail while the case proceeds. Number 2. Fleeing fugitives captured. Surveillance footage captured a blue Honda Civic pulling up to a Newark, New Jersey sidewalk just moments before a young man named Latrell Duncan was shot dead in 2022. In the video, someone wearing a ski mask exits the passenger side of the vehicle and runs away in the direction of the scene where the shooting occurred. He soon returns and the car speeds off. Duncan still had a few years of high school left, yet was considered one of the state's top young basketball prospects. In addition to being a standout player, he was a good student who was well-liked among his peers. His aunt, Marcia Douglas, told the New York Times that the shooting occurred shortly after Duncan's high school was let out for the day. Duncan was with a group of friends on the sidewalk when two men confronted them. Words were briefly exchanged, then the parties went their separate ways. Douglas, who heard about what happened from witnesses, said that she didn't know what was said, but that Duncan brushed off the first encounter. He was killed just minutes later. With the help of other surveillance cameras and an automatic license plate reader, investigators tracked the suspects to a home in nearby East Orange, both before and after Duncan's murder. Authorities charged 22-year-old Josiah Wade and an unidentified minor with murder and conspiracy to commit murder, but have yet to reveal a possible motive. A relative of Wade's reportedly told detectives that the young man had lived with her recently and his parents kicked him out of their home. But, she said, he was disrespectful, and she also ended up asking him to leave a few days after the crime. And number 1, the murder of Madison Harris. On the afternoon of February 24, 2020, James Waldick's Ring camera alerted him to some activity going outside his Biloxi, Mississippi home. He opened the app connected to the camera and saw that there was an ambulance outside the house, which he shared with his fiancée and her 16-year-old granddaughter, Madison Harris. Another Ring camera showed a teenage girl entering the house, followed by 4 more teens who stormed in about a half hour later. Their entrance was followed by shooting and screaming. The intruders shot Madison dead. They were easily identified thanks to the Ring footage and were soon charged with capital murder. Waldeck recognized some of the suspects as Madison's friends, but thought back to how the family's home had been burglarized a few weeks earlier. He theorized that the killers shot her as revenge for reporting the burglary to the authorities. The day the teens shot Madison, police believed they originally went there to commit a robbery, while Waldeck suspected that they went there with the intent to murder her. There haven't been any updates since their arrests. Thanks for watching. Would you rather see someone you know breaking into your house on your doorbell camera, or someone you don't know? Which would be worse? Tell us in the comments below, and remember to subscribe. See you next time. Bye for now.